Behind me, you can see the very famous bookshelf because I do have the living room tonight. So it's one of those special nights where I have the famous bookshelf behind me. We are here in the living room of my lovely Brooklyn apartment. We have one super chat already about universal basic income, and I'm writing it down. But welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Shout out to David Fox, a beloved member of our community, because I am wearing the shirt that David Fox gave me. He sent me a shirt for his labor union, and I am wearing it. So there you go. He gave me the shirt off his back, and I am wearing it. I think it's probably a different size, so it's not exactly the shirt off his back, but it's a lovely shirt. It's a really nice shirt. It's a great shirt. Proud to be union, supporting the labor movement. So thank you, David, for all that you've done. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Please do. Please do. Hit the notifications bell, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. The way this show works is I give my opening remarks, which are then followed at that point, after I give my opening remarks. I'm trying to get the camera at the right angle here. After I give my opening remarks, at that point, we do the roll call, and I call you out as I see you, names and locations, and then after I do that, after I call you out as I see you, names and locations, then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So welcome to 2022. This is the first live stream of the year, and we kicked it last year. I mean, we kicked it. We did a great job last year, and we're going to do an even better job this year. We are growing. We are expanding. This community is getting stronger. Shout out to everybody who sent me their goals for the year. I received quite a few emails from people. I'm going to make a point. You got to give me time, but I am going to try to reply to those emails. So if you can just give me time, I can't do it immediately. Got a lot of things on my schedule coming up, but that's okay. That's all good. Here we are. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to the year of 2022. That is the year that we are living in. It's the year of our Lord, 2022. And in the year of 2022, things are not looking too good. The economy is not looking so well. The global stage is not looking particularly good either. There are a number of concerns that people have right now. And when it comes to the economy, we're constantly being told about inflation, right? A dollar ain't a dollar anymore. The value of the US dollar is decreasing. It costs more to buy food than it did about a year ago. Costs more to buy gasoline than it did about a year ago. It costs more to buy all kinds of things than it did about a year ago. And what is it that is driving the inflation? Now, you generally get two answers. You get two answers in mainstream U.S. media. The first answer you get is the government is printing too much money. The government is printing too much money. Now, what this, rational real. All right. That's a standard libertarian answer. The government is printing too much money. Now, the government does print money, right? We do have a fiat currency. The Federal Reserve system is obviously we don't have a gold standard anymore. We do have a Federal Reserve Bank that prints fiat currency. But in times when there's not a lot of inflation, there is also money being printed. The Federal Reserve is always printing money as a way of stabilizing the economy, and that is not always having the same results. Furthermore, the other answer you'll get is that people say, well, it's the wages of workers, right? There's a labor shortage right now. The economy is coming back on as a result of the pandemic, and these workers are just demanding too much money. Well, that one's also false because the rate of inflation is 6.55%, right? That's the inflation that we've had is 6.55%, and wages of American workers have not risen by 6.5%. They haven't risen that high. So if it was the wages of the workers, if the working class overall was making an average of 6% more this year than they made before, that would make sense. It would be the workers' fault, so to speak, but they're not. They're not. 6.55% is not the increase in workers' wages. Workers' wages have not gone up that much. So what is the cause of it? Well, at the end of the day, the ultimate cause is this. The ultimate cause is that due to the fact that there are quote-unquote supply chain issues, due to the fact that demand is now increasing because we're coming out of the pandemic, there's more demand for gasoline, there's more demand for food supplies, people are going out more once again. The capitalists who sell these things, the agribusiness corporations, the big oil companies, the stores, the big box stores that people shop in, Walmart and Amazon and all the big sellers, the ones who set the prices, have determined that they can make more money. And that's really what it gets down to, right? It is the capitalist, the seller, that sets the price of the commodity. And the capitalist has determined that he can get more profits from it. And that is generally the cause of inflation. The capitalist is always looking to maximize the amount of profits that he makes. And so, in a situation like this, where there's increased demand, where a number of stores have closed down, you have to remember that Walmart used to have a lot more competitors. But since the pandemic, all those small community stores, not all of them, but many of those small community stores have closed down. Walmart has a lot less competition than it had before. Amazon has a lot less competition than it had before. At the same time, there is a lower supply, a lower amount of products, so there's more demand from the public. And in that situation, the seller, the capitalist, can increase the price of the commodity. And that's the situation. However, there's an obvious solution. There's a very obvious solution to this. And if Joe Biden were to do this, the problem would be solved. Joe Biden could easily do what Richard Nixon did. Richard Nixon, his opponent, a Republican, in the 1970s, was faced with a similar situation. There was an economic slowdown, and Richard Nixon imposed his famous Nixon shocks. 1972, in response to economic woes in the United States, Nixon imposed the famous Nixon shocks. He took the United States off the gold standard, but what did he also do? He imposed wage and price controls. Now, I'm not for a wage control, but I'm for a price control, right? And that's easily could be done. The President of the United States could impose a price control. That could be done. Could be very easily done, right? He could take emergency economic measures and declare a price freeze. He could freeze the price of food. He could freeze the price of gasoline. He could do it. It would be within his power to do so. Nixon did it in 1972. There were other presidents throughout U.S. history who took similar moves. And if Joe Biden was really a fighter for the working class, he could very easily step right up to the plate and impose a price freeze. Easily, very easily, just like Nixon did, right? Nixon very famously kicked Milton Friedman out of the White House. He said, we're all Keynesians now, meaning that he rejected the radical free market ideas of Milton Friedman, said that we need the government to control the economy to some degree or other, like John Maynard Keynes, the British economist, said. And he then imposed wage and price controls. Why can't Joe Biden do that? Now, I've got a couple, all right, Chinese venture capitalist, right, Eric Lee, writing that down, and writing down the next one. If robots can entirely replace human labor, robots entirely replace human labor. Transhumanism. All right, so that's the situation. And so the next time someone tells you that the problem is that the government is just printing too much money, the problem is those greedy workers who are out on strike, the problem is that we have the government too involved in the economy, think again, right? Because again, the government could simply step in and impose a price freeze. That could happen, and they're not doing it. They're not doing it. And instead, they're writing articles telling us to deal with it. I don't know if you saw this. Well, the Washington Post, CNN, a number of publications, liberal publications, have been just telling us to just accept this, right? Just accept the rising cost of food. Just accept the rising price of gasoline. Just accept it. Just accept it. Just deal with it. That has been the message of the Democratic Party. Just deal with it, right? They've gone from being the party that was supposed to build a better America, blah, 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 and they've become the party of just deal with it. Just deal with it is what they're telling us. Now, there's a reason, I think, that you can tell that people all across the country are saying, let's go Brandon. Because we need a government of action that will fight for working families. We don't need a government that'll tell us to just suck it up and deal with it. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Joe Biden has already given up on helping the students of this country, the students of the United States, and they need their student debt to be relieved. We need education to be a human right. We need to take the tremendous strain of financial, student debt out of the economy. But Joe Biden has basically decided he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. We need Joe Biden to impose a price freeze and stop the dramatic rise in the price of things people need to survive, like food, like gas to drive to work, etc. That needs to be done, but it has not been done. And so, not surprisingly, people are screaming, let's go Brandon. Now, there's another aspect of this whole inflation thing, and it's not hitting us as much here in the United States. Here in the United States, we're not in exactly this situation. I mean, the price of heating gas is certainly high, right? All right. Why? Wealthy people. Writing them down. But the price of gasoline in the United States has been rising, and it's winter time, and people are heating their homes with natural gas. And why are they heating their homes with natural gas? Because it's cheaper. It's much cheaper to heat your home with natural gas than it is with electricity. Electricity is much more expensive when it comes to heating your home. Now, they just passed a law here in New York City that all of the buildings that are built, all the new buildings they're building, must have electrical heating rather than gas heating, because they say burning natural gas is bad for the environment. But regardless of all of that, natural gas, right? Natural gas, the price of it has gone up. And so in the United States, we're not hit as badly with it. We have our natural gas from here, but in Europe in particular, they're being hit with high natural gas prices. And so what are they doing? They're blaming Russia for it. They're saying that this is Russia's fault. This is all Russia's fault. Russia is doing this. Well, Russia's not doing this. Russia has not decreased in any way the amount of natural gas they're exporting. Russia is a major natural gas exporter. They have not cut back on their export of natural gas. They've been doing everything that they are expected to do. They have not received any new requests. Meanwhile, there is a giant pipeline, natural gas pipeline called Nord Stream 2, connecting Russia to Germany, that has been completed. It is fully completed, but it is not functioning yet. There's no natural gas coming from it. So if the European Union countries that are now blaming Russia for the rising price of natural gas wanted to stop and wanted to have the costs of natural gas go down, they could easily turn on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They're not doing it, right? The United States tried to kill the Nord Stream 2 pipeline with sanctions. That didn't work. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline is completed, but now it hasn't been turned on yet. Well, so now we have a situation where, again, if the European powers are really that concerned about the price of natural gas, the heat of natural gas in these winters, if they are concerned about it, they should turn on the natural gas pipeline called Nord Stream 2. And of course, they don't do that, right? And they're everything related to Russia. There's always politics involved. They're always playing politics. So there you go. Now, I wanted to mention some other things. I don't know if you saw, but on New Year's Eve, a number of cars were torched in France. There have been riots going on in Norway and in other parts of Europe against these lockdown measures. And what is really motivating these riots that are happening is the economic toll of these lockdowns, right? We were told that this would all end once everyone got vaccinated. Now, it's still going on. The lockdowns are still happening. The COVID restrictions are still in place. We're being told now to go get a booster. I'm probably going to get a booster next week. We'll see. And now in Israel, they have got a fourth shot that they were approving for people to get. And so all across Europe, there are a number of people who are saying, we're sick of this. When is this going to end? The global economy needs to turn back on. They're angry about it. They're angry about seeing their living standards go down. They're angry about the economy being a wreck, and they're rising up and protesting. And they've attacked these crowds with dogs. You should look at what the dogs are doing to these crowds. It's just horrendous what these dogs are doing to these crowds. These crowds have been torching cars, lighting cars on fire in protest, and it's been some rowdy times in Europe, right? And many see this as a continuation of the Yellow Vests, right? The Yellow Vests were a protest movement in France that started out against how working people were being forced to pay a lot more for gasoline because the French president, Macron, he said that that was necessary in order to fight global warming. And I think the issue of these protests that we're seeing in Europe, and the issue of the protests that we're seeing, we saw before the Yellow Vests, the issue behind Occupy Wall Street, the issue behind the anti-lockdown protests we've seen here in the United States. The issue is this. The issue is not vaccines being real or fake. That's not the issue, right? Vaccines are real. COVID is real. That's not the issue at hand. I'm not a biologist. I'm not here to talk about that kind of thing. That's not the issue. The issue is that the working class is being made to pay for a capitalist crisis, right? It is the capitalist system that can't handle the COVID-19 pandemic. It is the system of production organized for profit that has been hit by this pandemic and had disastrous results. The United States, we have the highest rate of COVID deaths of any country in the world. It's just unbelievable, the rate of COVID deaths here. Western Europe, it's much higher, but if you look at socialist countries like China, like Vietnam, like the region of Kerala in India that is run by communists, they handled it much better. A capitalist crisis has devastated this country economically. There are lines of people that are hungry outside. There are stores that have been just closed down all throughout the United States. At the same time, the infrastructure of the country is falling. We don't have proper hospitals in the United States. Many people have pointed this out. They're concerned about hospitals being overcrowded. Why don't they build more hospitals? In China, the state responded to the pandemic with an emergency hospital building program. But here in the United States, we're being told we have to have more lockdowns because what about space in the hospitals? Well, how about you go out and build more hospitals, right? Katyn massacre. How about you go out and build more hospitals, right? Why don't you hire all the unemployed people? Why don't you hire all the people that are anxious to go back to work and hire them to build new hospitals? I remember when I was in Cleveland, I was on the east side of Cleveland in 2010. We had a demonstration to save the Huron Road Trauma Center. There is a hospital on Huron Road in Cleveland. And it was where you would go if you had a head trauma, if you were shot in the head, if you were hit in the head really bad, and if you were at risk of dying, you went to the Huron Road Trauma Center. And the city of Cleveland, during an economic crisis, closed down the trauma center at Huron Road. And so I was out in the streets with Black on Black Crime Incorporated, Art McCoy, the Nation of Islam, labor unions, and community groups, and we protested to save Huron Road Trauma Center because it was a matter of life and death. Right? If you got, shot in the head or hit in the head and you were on the east side of Cleveland, which is less economically prosperous, and you got injured, you would have to go all the way over to the west side of Cleveland to get treatment for your very serious life-threatening head injury. And we protested, save Huron Road, save Huron Road Trauma Center. But all across the United States, this is happening. The hospitals that literally are a matter of life and death have been closed down. On top of that, we don't have health care as a right, so people that are insured, they go to the hospital and they're stuck with a big bill, even if they are insured. If they're not insured, they might lose their house. These are horrendous situations. We saw when the pandemic first started, people who came back from the United States, or came back to the United States after they were traveling. The beginning of the pandemic were hit with astronomical bills for COVID-19 tests. And if you weren't insured, you were out of luck. And it was ridiculous. People that were trying to do the right thing and get tested for COVID when they came back to the United States at the very beginning of this pandemic, they were being charged astronomical fees for their COVID tests. Right now, there's a shortage of tests. Joe Biden promised more tests would be available, but right now here in New York City, there's a shortage of tests. Right? It used to be for a couple weeks, it seemed like you could just go to one of those tents, but now they've been closing down testing centers. I don't know if you've heard about this. So this is all ridiculous, right? Right. All right. Trump felt used. All right. And that's a situation. So we got to talk about all this. The way the capitalists have tried to resolve this crisis of COVID-19 is by making the workers pay and making small business owners pay. Lockdowns, shut down the economy, put workers out of work, and instead they should have responded by building more hospitals. They should have responded by guaranteeing people the right to health care as a human right. They should have responded. By providing actual proper medical care. There should be a price freeze right now amid this inflation that's going on. The president of the United States could do that. Nixon did it. I don't see why Joe Biden couldn't do it. But we don't have a government that fights for working families. Instead, we have a government that works for the big corporations and monopolies. And that's the situation. And a lot of working people are angry about it. And the government of the United States is determined not to bail out the people, not to respond to this economic crisis with assistance for the people. As far as they're concerned, they will do anything, ABC, anything but class, anything but respect the rights of the workers, mobilize class struggle. They'll do anything but that. And right now they're trying to gloss over the fact that workers, white, black, Asian, Arab, Latino, workers are suffering amid this pandemic while Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and the Walton family that own Walmart are enriching themselves, right? While Mark Zuckerberg, while Eric Schmidt, while they are just raking in the profits, right? While the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Morgans are rolling in profits amid the rising oil prices. While all of this is happening, we are basically being told that we cannot fight as workers. We're being told we're not allowed to demand that AOC force the vote and fight for Medicare for all. We can't do that, we're told, because if you do that, you're a fascist, right? We're being told we cannot demand things like a price freeze. We cannot do that. We're just supposed to be happy. We're just supposed to be happy about the fact that U.S. imperialism is giving itself a woke makeover, that now the United States is super aware and super conscious around the issue of racism. Well, that's good. Right? It's good that there's more awareness about racism. Absolutely. I remember, when I was organizing years ago, I would, talk to working class people in Cleveland and, a lot of working class white people. I would talk to them about, labor issues. I would talk to them about capitalism, and they were on board until I started talking about police brutality. And then they would roll their eyes and they'd say, oh boy, you're one of those, and that the racism, the inability to recognize that black people have been singled out and targeted by police brutality, by racism, by discrimination, that black people exist as an oppressed nationality within U.S. society, a colonized people, that any recognition of that was something that a big section of U.S. society would not do. Well, now it seems like from the highest levels of government, from Joe Biden to Mitt Romney to Kamala Harris, now there's this recognition that racism is a plague on U.S. society. Good. Okay, good. But you cannot talk about racism without putting it in the context of capitalism, without putting it in the context of an economic system that puts profits over people. Racism is a tool of the bosses. It is a tool of the bosses to super exploit black workers, to buy off the complicity and the lack of resistance on the part of white workers. Racism has always been a tool of the bosses to oppress the working class. And it hurts all workers. Obviously, it hurts the workers the most, who are the victims of it, but it hurts the entire working class. That conversation, what I just said, is not allowed. Instead, we have the 1619 Project that is rewriting the history of the American Revolution and saying that W.E.B. Du Bois, the great Marxist scholar, that he was wrong. Saying that Tony Monteiro, the great Marxist scholar of Philadelphia, that he's wrong. Right? Saying that the analysis that guided so many great African-American revolutionaries, Paul Robeson, Huey Newton, Fred Hampton, Eldridge Cleaver, that so many great black revolutionaries who put forward a Marxist analysis of U.S. society, why the American Revolution happened, etc. Oh no, they're completely wrong. According to the New York Times, the voice of capitalism in the United States, the only reason the American Revolution ever happened, it was to preserve slavery, and that Americans are just deeply, deeply racist. Everything in U.S. society must be interpreted in terms of race, and that you cannot talk about economic justice if it includes the multinational working class. That is the memo being sent out from the ruling class. That's what they're telling us right now. We cannot draw from the science of Marxism-Leninism, right? I mean, if you go and watch the interview that Huey Newton, the leader of the Black Panther Party, did. The leader of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, did an interview on television with William F. Buckley on his show Firing Line. And he started out by asking William F. Buckley if he supported the American Revolution. That's how it began, with William F. Buckley being asked by a black revolutionary, would you have supported the American Revolution? And William F. Buckley said, yeah. Well, yes, I would support the American Revolution, yes. And Huey Newton responded, good, because it was an anti-colonial struggle. Huey Newton, the leader of the Black Panther Party, was a supporter of the American Revolution. He understood that the American Revolution was a struggle against the British free trade system, the Adam Smith economic system. Now, obviously, Huey Newton didn't support murdering the Native Americans. Clearly, Huey Newton didn't support slavery. But he understood that the American Revolution represented a break with the British oligarchical Atlanticist economic order that gave birth to what is now called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. However, you're not allowed to say what Huey Newton said. You're not allowed to say what Fred Hampton said, right? Fred Hampton built a rainbow coalition, fighting for workers' power. You're not allowed to do that now. Oh, no. The memo has gone out that you must march in lockstep behind Joe Biden. You cannot demand he enforce price controls. You cannot demand that he that he have health care and Medicare for all. Oh, no. You must march in lockstep behind Joe Biden, and you must reinterpret U.S. history, not as a condemnation of capitalism, not drawing from W.E.B. Du Bois and the great Marxist scholars who existed. No, we must reinterpret the history of capitalism as white people are big, fat meanies, and white workers deserve to be poorer. That's the memo that we're supposed to take. Well, that's not what W.E.B. Du Bois thought. That's not what Herbert Apotheker thought. That's not what Angela Davis thought. That's not what Gus Hall thought. That is not what the Black Panthers believed. That is not what Claudia Jones, the great revolutionary writer and leader of the Communist Party during the 1950s, believed. That is not the case. Paul Robeson didn't believe that. Langston Hughes did not believe that, right? But that is what the U.S. imperialist ruling class is telling us to believe. And that is a problem. We should not accept that. We must oppose all attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. When the capitalist system fails, like it has failed during this pandemic, we must oppose all attempts to make we, the working class, pay for the failure of their system. And they're making us pay for it right now. They're making us pay for it with their price increases and their inflation. They're making us pay for it now with their rising gasoline prices and their rising food prices. They're making us pay for it right now. In so many ways. They're making us pay for it with these lockdowns. They're making us pay for it by not building adequate hospitals. They're making the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. And we must reject that. And we must bring back a program of class struggle. Medicare for all, jobs for all, health care for all. A job is a right. Organize and resist. We must bring back a program of class struggle. And a program of class struggle will involve highlighting the needs of black people. Absolutely. Black people will be on the front lines of the class struggle because they always have been. If you look at the 1970s, when there was a labor upsurge, right? Cleaver. When there was a labor upsurge, during the 1970s, when that happened, it was because of black workers. It was the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, DRUM, right? In Detroit, black auto workers felt that their needs were not being respected by the UAW union. And so in Detroit, you had 1974, Wildcat Summer. I believe I've got the book about it here. Where is that? Do I have the book about it here? Yes. No. Where I have the book on this very issue. Yes, right here. You can read all about it in this book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, right? A study in urban revolution. And in this book, you will read about the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, DRUM. This was a group of black auto workers in Detroit who organized wildcat strikes in the auto plants, the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, led by Ken Cockrell. And they did amazing stuff, right? Amazing stuff. And they were Maoists, and they were Marxist-Leninists, and they were amazing, amazing folks. And it was black workers pushing the entire working class into motion. And believe it or not, the DRUM Revolutionary Union movement, pushed forward the struggle for Palestine because near Detroit, near the city of Detroit, there's a suburb of Detroit that has the highest concentration of Arab Americans in any part of the United States. There is a suburb of Detroit called Dearborn, Michigan. And Arab workers walked out of their plants and protested in the streets to support the Palestinians. And so, of course, what did the mainstream media in Michigan say about the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement and the Arab workers, the Iraqi workers, the Yemeni workers, the Syrian workers? All right, JBV's in Texas. What did it say about all of them? What did it say about all these workers who went out to protest? They had wildcat strikes in support of the Palestinians. What did it say? It said they were anti-Semitic. That was the allegation. They said that the black workers in the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, that they were anti-Semites because they were supporting their Palestinian brothers and sisters, standing against U.S. support for Israel. You can read all about it right here in this book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, a study in urban revolution, right? And it was through a class struggle, through fighting for the needs of workers on the job, that the needs of black people took priority. And there's no contradiction between opposing racism and fighting for the entire working class. There is no contradiction. The people who want us to believe that there's a contradiction are the capitalist bosses. The people who want us to believe that somehow we have to pick that if you oppose racism, that means you can't fight for economic demands. Or if you fight for economic demands, that means you're a Nazbol or a Red Brown or a white supremacist. No. Wrong. Incorrect. That is utterly false. That is absolutely, utterly false. And it is a lie from the capitalist bosses, right? They are always trying to poison the struggle, to play different sections of the working class against each other. And we have got to oppose that. We must oppose all attempts to make the working class pay for the capitalist crisis. The capitalists have created this crisis with COVID, and we, the working class, have no choice but to organize and resist. There need to be more Medicare for all marches in the United States right now. There need to be more people doing what Jimmy Dore and Jackson Hinkle are doing, and getting out there and not caving behind Joe Biden, not policing the movement and trying to silence dissident voices, but making real demands on Joe Biden. Demand a price freeze, right? Demand health care for all. These are our serious demands. We have our 4-point program at the Center for Political Innovation. Our 4-point plan, right? A mass program to rebuild the infrastructure of the United States, which includes hospitals, which is something desperately needed at this time. Second thing would be public control of oil and gas and other natural resources, public control of the banking system, public control of credit, and finally, an economic bill of rights, including the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to education. This is a class struggle program. This is a class struggle program. And because it doesn't sound and use all the buzzwords of the capitalist bosses and their 1619 project and their wokest revamping of American imperialism, because it doesn't use their favorite buzzwords, it is being attacked by people that are agents of the ruling class. And the fact that we are being attacked by them is a good sign. If you read Mao Zedong's Little Red Book, what does he say? He says to be attacked by the enemy is a good thing and not a bad thing, because to be attacked by the enemy shows that you are in the struggle. That's what Chairman Mao says in the Little Red Book. And that has got to be the approach, right? We need to be on the offensive. Joe Biden is not our friend. Nancy Pelosi is not our friend. AOC is not our friend. The squad are not our friends. What we need now more than anything is class struggle, not fake academic wokeism. That is what we need more than anything. Our enemies are not average white workers who might be confused. Our enemies are the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies. Our enemies are the Bill Gateses. Our enemies are the Jeff Bezoses. Our enemies are the Eric Schmidts of this world. Our enemies are the billionaire profiteers who are driving this country into greater and greater and greater poverty. That's who the enemy of the working people of America is. And only a unified class struggle against this enemy and a repolarization, not in lines of red states versus blue states, but in lines of workers versus the bosses, working class against the imperialists. That is what is needed in America at this time. I've got a couple more super chats to write down. All right. Indonesian. Okay, I'm writing down the other. Critique. That is what is needed at this time. That is the only way out of this. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Right? And just like the Black Panthers realized that North Korea was their ally, that Cuba was their ally, that Libya was their ally, that China was their ally, any struggle against the capitalist bosses here in the United States must be an anti-imperialist struggle. It must be a struggle in which the working people of the United States see their allies as those around the world that are struggling against the domination of U.S. imperialism. That is absolutely necessary. You cannot struggle against the billionaires and bosses in the United States and somehow join them in the campaign against Russia. You cannot struggle against the billionaire banker corporations that control the United States and somehow align with them in their struggle to crush the Islamic Republic of Iran. You cannot, you absolutely cannot be in struggle and opposition to the capitalists here and join with them in their campaign against Nicaragua and Venezuela and Cuba, right? That there is a global imperialist system. There is one monster with many faces and many heads, one global hydra, one global octopus with many tentacles all across the planet. But it is centered around Wall Street. It is centered around the 4 super major oil companies. It is centered around the Silicon Valley social engineering fascists who want to try and tell us what we're allowed to say on Facebook and Twitter and want to shut down our rights and want to program us like rats in a maze. It is this global system of monopoly capitalism, this global system of monopoly capitalism that enforces its will with drones and sanctions and bombs and invasions. This is the enemy of working families in the United States. And the reason that we are getting hit with these food prices, the reason that our roads are falling apart, the reason our children are getting addicted to opioids, the reason that our young people are being locked in jail, the reason our living standards is going down is because this system is in a state of collapse. The banks, the factories, and the industries must be organized, I don't know who that is, must be organized to serve public good. and not the profits of a few. That is the absolute urgent necessity of the hour. At this time, they are in the process of eliminating the worker from the assembly line. They have been replacing human labor with machines. This is how they have operated for so long, replacing human labor with machines. Self-driving cars would be a great thing in a rational economic system because it would mean there was far less work to do. Everybody who had to drive a truck for a living or a taxi driver or whatnot, they could do something else with their time. It would free up all kinds of labor and allow humanity to be more productive. However, under capitalism, an innovation like self-driving cars has the opposite effect. Self-driving cars means mass unemployment for millions of working families. It means millions of truck drivers out of work, millions of cab drivers out of work, millions of delivery folks out of work. It's irrational. The capitalist system is constantly looking to replace workers with machines. And in the process of doing it, they drive down living standards. They make labor that does exist easier to replace. They make a situation where there's more competition for jobs so they can get away with paying lower and lower wages. They create a situation like that. Thank you, Millennial Splaining. They create a situation like that where wages are going down, where workers are being replaced by machines, and it leads to greater and greater poverty. And then they have a big problem because the worker is also the consumer. And the worker can never buy back the product that he produces. And soon the market is glutted with products that cannot be sold. And this is the built-in problem of overproduction. Overproduction. And the tendency of the falling rate of profit. These are the built-in problems of the capitalist system that Karl Marx talks about in this very book, Capital, right? It's very much described here. The only way you resolve these problems of overproduction, the only way you can resolve them is with the banks, factories, and industries, and the centers of economic power being organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. We need an economy that is organized to serve the people. We need a society where the means of production, the banks, factories, and industries are public property and work in the interests of all society. What we need is a government of action that will fight for working families, a government of action that will fight for working families, that will improve people's lives. We need to get out of the notion that greed is good, out of the notion that the government is best that governs least. And instead of having a government that kicks our ass on behalf of the Wall Street people, we need a government of action that will kick the ass of the billionaire class on behalf of working families of this country. Instead of a government that is trying to foment the divisions among Americans, play one group against another, play the red states against the blue states, play public workers against private workers, play the rural population against the urban population. Instead of a government that is trying to foment division, balkanize the country, grind us down into atomized, isolated individuals separated from each other, instead of that, we need a government of action that mobilizes people, brings them together to march forward and start building once again in America. It is time to start building in America. It's time to start building the country up. Joe Biden's Build Back Better program should really be called Build Back Smaller, right? Every aspect of his Build Back Better program is about making us accept less, lower quality, lower consumption, less. It's about building back smaller. Tear down the nuclear power plant and put up a windmill. That's not what we need. We need to build back bigger. We need to build back stronger. We need to build back better and more powerful. That's what we need more than anything. Joe Biden's Build Back Better program is about shrinking the United States, collapsing the United States into his global, open international system. It is about letting the country deteriorate even further into a low-wage police state, with people getting poorer. The life expectancy in the United States has gone down by 1.9 years since the beginning of this pandemic. Can you believe this? Americans are now living almost 2 years less on average than they were living at the beginning of this pandemic. If you want to talk about a failure a failure on the part of Donald Trump, a failure on the part of Joe Biden. That's what we're looking at. And now is not the time to just dissolve into the wokeness, right? Better. Wrote it down. Now is not the time to just dissolve into the wokeness. Now is not the time to just, do whatever is trendy on CNN and join whatever the latest trendy liberal woke cause is. No. Now is the time to make real economic demands, to mobilize the working class, to mobilize against the imperialists. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need to resist their drive toward war, and we need to mobilize, organize, and resist. And those are my opening remarks for tonight. If you've been around here, you've heard a lot of that before, but it's okay because it needs to be said because it's not being said enough. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's start doing the roll call. Names and locations, I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations, who is with us tonight? Names and locations, I'll call you out as I see you. Who's with us? Who's with us? Melbourne, Australia. Tulare, California. Rice in Adelaide, Australia. Ricky Rosso in Texas. Shout out to you, Ricky. Welcome. Clydebank. Eddie from Indonesia. Ash in Chicago. John in Houston. Chaya from Montreal. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Fairmont, West Virginia. St. David's, Bermuda. Zachary Brunch. Springfield, Missouri. David in China. Chris in Detroit. David Fox in Bendigo, Australia. Wearing your shirt. Wearing your shirt you sent me. Great stuff. Pierre in Montreal. Auckland, New Zealand. Hugo from the Netherlands. Grand Junction, Colorado. San Miguel from Allende, Mexico. JT24 from Mississippi. Char Darling out in San Angelo. I heard you had a kick-ass class tonight on dialectical materialism. I can't wait to hear about it. Auckland, New Zealand. Ben in Denver, right? Yiho from Taiwan. You mean Yiho from a part of China known as Taiwan. Arturo from Alaska. Tristan from Maryland. Got your email. Great to talk to you. Can't wait to reply. New Hope, Minnesota. Balthazar in Oaks. Harold from Illinois. Mark from California. Hello, Caleb. We love your work. Shout out to you. China and Russia are always working with Israel. I don't know what that has to do with anything. JR in Kalamazoo. I've been to Kalamazoo, Michigan. Wisconsin. South Carolina, Seattle. Temple City, California. British Columbia, Canada. Nathaniel from Washington. Connecticut. Charlie from Hamilton, Ontario. Sheffield, UK. Pomona, California. Salt Lake City, SLC. All right, we got somebody in Utah watching. Southern California. Diego from Colombia, Viva Venezuela. Helen in Riverview, Canada. Very good. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Ohio. Chatham from Ontario. Tony from Tasmania. Neil Fraser out in Hong Kong, China. Shout out to you, Neil. Right? Gisborne, Australia. Best case scenario in the upcoming French elections. Right? Right? Dave from Hamilton, Ontario. Bezos Valley. JBVs in San Angelo. Shout out to you, JBVs. I heard about your amazing class. I can't wait to hear a full report on how it went. Big up to the anti-imperialists. Ben from Illinois. Natalie in Maryland. Shout out to you, Natalie. Yes, Dunk from Southern California. Nicholas in Vancouver, Canada. Jose from Newburgh, right? Newburgh, that's close to New York City here. That's in this area. Hi from New Jersey, says Millennial Splaining. Well, shout out to you. Bess has got a great channel. Bess has got a great channel, Millennial Splaining. And in fact, I'll make you a mod, Bess. You are now a mod. Welcome to the community. Moscow, Russia, says Spider Jerusalem. Harold from Naples, Florida, good friend of the program. There we go. There we go. All right. I think that's our roll call. So now I'll start answering the questions. I will start answering the questions. All right. All right. The first question. Oh, mercantilism and capitalism. All right. All right. All right. Okay, all right. First question is universal basic income. Do you support it, and is it socialism? Do I support it? Sure. If we could give a basic income to working people, that would alleviate some of their suffering. I'm for it. However, I am not for abolishing all the other social programs, number one, which many advocates of universal basic income are in favor of. And number two, universal basic income is not socialism. But I'm for it. And let's talk about this. Now, universal basic income means that every person in the country would get a bank deposit. Every month, you'd get a bank deposit. And that would benefit working people. They'd have more money to spend, cover things like their rent, their food. It would be better for the economy to do that because, instead of bailing out the banks and bailing out, giving tax cuts to the rich, if you give money to average people, they tend to spend that money. But here's the problem. Many advocates of universal basic income, like Charles Murray, for example, Charles Murray is the author of that racist book called The Bell Curve, they say, let's have a universal basic income in place of food stamps, in place of unemployment insurance, in place of all other social programs. And they see it as austerity. They don't want the government to hire all kinds of people to run the Department of Agriculture and handle your food stamps, to run the Department of Labor, to handle your unemployment. So the idea is they lay off all of those government workers who get good paying, those are union jobs, good paying jobs. I mean, they're making, in some cases, six figures. Lay all of them off and just have a computer automatically bank transfer, money into your account. And I see that as potentially very, very, very dangerous. And the reason for that is if you get rid of all of those government jobs in the economy, that's going to take far more money out of the economy than you would put into it by giving everyone universal basic income, right? So that's number one. Number two, right? It's only then a matter of time, after you've abolished all of those social programs and everyone's just getting a bank transfer, for one state to say, hey, convicted pedophiles shouldn't get $2,000 a month. And then they say, oh, okay, let's do that. And then there's a bunch of starving convicted pedophiles out on the street. And if they can then do it to pedophiles, they can say, well, actually, all convicts, anyone who's ever been convicted of a felony, why should the government be giving them money? And pretty soon, all convicts are out on the street. And pretty soon, there's all kinds of people that get their $2,000 a month cut off, and they're rioting in the streets. And they have nothing, right? And that is dangerous, right? And so I am for universal basic income by itself. I'm not for using it to abolish all other social programs. I'm not for seeing it as the end-all and be-all. But that would be a victory. If the government of the United States were forced to start cutting every citizen of the United States a check for $2,000 a month, that would improve people's lives very significantly. So I'm for it. I'm just not for abolishing all the social programs. I'm not for it the way Milton Friedman advocated it. Milton Friedman, one of the satanic godfathers of neoliberalism, he advocated a universal basic income, and in his mind, it was a way to impose austerity. It was a way to get rid of social programs, right? So I'm not for it. I'm not for it in that way, but by itself, right? Right-wingers. But as an idea by itself, I'm for it. No, I'm not for a lot of what advocates of it generally support. But as a program, I mean, look, if at any point the wealth is being redistributed to the working people, and the burden of a capitalist crisis is taken out off of the people, and the people are given some relief, I'm for it. So it's important to keep that in mind. But yeah, there are a lot of people who advocate it for bad reasons, but overall the basic concept is good. Alrighty. I don't know enough about Hegel, Chaya, to get in there. If I give you an answer to that question, I'm gonna get it wrong, most likely. I have kind of an idea about what is meant there, but I'm afraid that if I give you a full-on answer, I'm going to embarrass myself because I don't know my philosophy as well as I should. So I apologize, Chaya. I'm not going to be able to answer your question on Hegel. I wish I could. Neil from Hong Kong is recommending that people check out the interview or the presentation given by a Chinese venture capitalist named Eric Lee. Well, I will check that out, Neil. I haven't had a chance to watch that myself, but I thank you for the recommendation. It's very important that we follow China and pay attention to the situation and everything that's going on in China and understand it, because there's, in a lot of ways, China doesn't fit into the political boxes that a lot of us have developed. And we need to not do that. We need to know more about it. It's a very important force in the world, and there's a lot that we can learn from China. So there we go. All right, next question. Will the robot entirely replace human labor? And if so, does that open the door to transhumanism? Well, first of all, within capitalism, as much as the role of the worker is constantly being reduced, there will always be some role for human labor, for the simple reason that you cannot extract surplus value from a machine. Only human labor can produce surplus value. If the capitalist does not exploit the labor of any worker, then he does not make any profits, right? You pay full price for a machine, and there's no profits to be made. If you look at how surplus value is determined, go look up the Marxist concept of surplus value. You can only extract surplus value from human labor. So the capitalist needs there to be a worker somewhere, right? Even if that worker is just a button pusher, even if he clocks in and pushes the button, they need him there, right? Even if they're paying him 3 cents an hour to sit there and push a button, the capitalist still has to have a worker, because if there's no worker involved in the process of production, he cannot extract surplus value. That's a very important point. That said, the capitalist would like to expand technology as much as possible and reduce the role of the worker in production as much as possible, right? Now, does this open the door to transhumanism? Only under socialism. Only under socialism. And look, when you talk about transhumanism, I think that's people think about like people becoming half robot and stuff like that. Well, obviously, I mean, I'm not going to write a science fiction novel. We're not going to have, like, what is it, Steve Austin, the Bionic Man? Isn't that a TV show from the 70s or something? We're not going to do that. But, we already, I mean, look, when people have a lung, they have an iron lung sometimes, right? And I think there's people who have pacemakers in their hearts, right? And we mix technology and human technology with the human body for health benefits already. And I don't see anything morally wrong with that, right? If you lost your leg in a car accident and we could then make a robot leg for you, what's wrong with that? I can't think of anything wrong with that, right? The concept of transhumanism is not inherently wrong. It raises some questions. I think there's a movie, Surrogates, that was a sci-fi movie that came out a few years ago that was quite interesting. And that, there's a lot of questions there, right? And that, how far would we be willing to go with this? But the basic concept of improving human life and improving human health by using technology, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And that this is one of those debates where again, you can't be deciding this with an anti-tech viewpoint. You can't be like, oh, we shouldn't be playing God. Well, no, I mean, there are obviously problems that could be foreseen. But at the end of the day, the idea of using technology to improve human life, I don't have a moral issue with, right? I guess, if it got to a very extreme point, there might be some serious mental health concerns as a result. There might be a situation of alienation, right? And I mean, we've all read Brave New World, by what's his name? Brave New World. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World. It's this sci-fi novel where human beings are being bred from machines. Women aren't becoming pregnant anymore, but humans are being bred from machines. Obviously, that's not an ideal situation. I think I don't think the idea of human babies being born from machines is a good thing. I think that's quite cold, and I think it would not result in the kind of human beings that we want. Human beings need affection, etc. But maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm not a biologist, but yeah, as far as transhumanism, I mean, it would have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. What specific proposals are we making is the question, right? Are we proposing that people have robot legs or robot feet or pacemakers in their heart? Or are we proposing that people have like surrogate robots who they just control with their minds? Or, is it like Hitler dies and we keep his brain in a jar? Did you ever see that? They actually made a movie. I remember reading about this. I used to have one of those books that was a book of movies. I remember this. I had one of these books, and it was just like a list of movies, and it would have like the name of the 2 starring actors and like one sentence about the plot. And I found there was actually a movie made at one point called, quote, They saved Hitler's brain. And it's this movie about how Hitler's brain is in a jar, in South America, and it's like giving orders to people or something. It's one of those old B sci-fi movies. So obviously, if we're having like people's brains in jars, not good. But what do I know? All right, next question. Okay, why are there lots of wealthy people in China? Well, there are lots of wealthy people in China because China is the second largest economy in the world. And at this point, many people say it is the biggest economy in the world. And lots of wealth has been generated because of socialism and the economic planning in the socialist economy of China, because they have a state that organizes the economy and has been maximizing GDP. Because of that, we have a situation where there's now a whole lot of new wealthy people in China. That said, China is the only country in the world other than Iran that has ever given the death penalty to billionaires. And the billionaires in China do not rule. The Chinese Communist Party rules over them. If at any point they go against the Communist Party, they could get the death penalty. Private capitalists in China they're not in charge, right? The government can come in at any point and tell them what products they can produce, what products not to produce. There was a situation recently where I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago now, there was the meat distributor that distributes meat to McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and other American stores and other American fast food stores in China. They were serving rotten meat to the public. So the Chinese Communist Party dragged the CEOs out of their offices in handcuffs, right? This happened in China, right? CEOs don't run China. Billionaires don't run China. The Communist Party runs China. The majority of the economy is state-run. There's a higher rate of state ownership in China than in Venezuela. It's about 50% state-run industries. But on top of that, all the private companies are not free to do what they want. They are forced to operate in accordance with what the Communist Party and the bureaucracy say. And because of that, China is not a capitalist country. There is capitalism in China. There are private companies that operate, but they operate in the context of a socialist planned economy. And that is the difference. And that's very, very important to be clear on. China is not a capitalist country. There is a higher level of inequality in China than there has ever been. Now, the inequality is not from the party bureaucracy. If you're a party bureaucrat in China, you might have a bigger house than everybody else. You might have a fancy car. You might get a bigger salary than other people. But if you're a Communist Party bureaucrat, you don't own any factories. You don't own the means of production, right? The capitalist class in China, they're a little bit different. And the bureaucracy that leads the Chinese Communist Party is at odds with the capitalist class. And a lot of the mass line campaign that was waged by President Xi Jinping was the Chinese Communist Party cracking down on the new capitalist class. There's a new level of inequality in China, and they're having to deal with it, this new level of inequality in China. The Chinese Communist Party is adjusting to this. Now that they have so much wealth in China, there's a lot more inequality than there used to be. And so they have to deal with that, right? And there's this layer in the Chinese society, the capitalist class, that does not share any loyalty to the revolution. Now, some of the Chinese capitalists do. There are many Chinese capitalists who feel that the Chinese revolution has benefited them. It's enabled them to become wealthy. And despite the fact that they're in the private sector, they're loyal to the party. But not all of them. I would say many Chinese capitalists are not loyal to the party. And because of that, the party has to control them. And when you read about the social credit system, what we hear in the United States about the social credit system is wildly exaggerated. But what we hear about the social credit system, et cetera, is an attempt to control the capitalist class. So there you go. Was Russia framed in the Katyn massacre? I don't know. I don't know the specifics of it. I've read what Grover Furr has written about it. I've heard some of the arguments from people who say that the Nazis committed the Katyn massacre and not Stalin. I do know that, interestingly enough, the Nazis were convicted of the Katyn massacre at the Nuremberg trials. That said, the Polish government maintains at this point that the Katyn massacre was done by Stalin. And also, I believe the government of Russia also says that the Katyn massacre was done by Stalin. There are many in Russia who don't believe that. There are many in Russia who are admirers of Stalin, and people who just say no, and they say, well, the bullets were from German guns, and they say that. Now, I just don't know the details of it. I can't tell you. I don't know. My answer is I don't know. because I'm not a historian, and there are some historians who say that it was definitely Hitler who did it, and there are some historians who say it was definitely Stalin who did it. Poland says it was Stalin who did it. The Russian government says it was Stalin who did it. However, until recently, it was assumed that Hitler did it, and the Nazis, were convicted of it at the Nuremberg trial. So I don't know. My answer is I don't know, right? I would assume that the Russian and Polish governments wouldn't be saying that Stalin did it if they didn't have a very strong reason to believe that. Then again, we know that the ruling class of the world has endlessly lied about the Soviet Union, and they have a huge motivation to do anything to demonize the Soviet Union. So I don't know. And at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. If the Katyn massacre happened, if a bunch of Polish government officials were rounded up and killed by the Soviet Union, that's wrong. I oppose that. If they were rounded up and killed without trial by the Soviet Union, that's wrong. And I don't support that. But that doesn't mean that socialism didn't work. Because socialism, despite, that bad thing happening, socialism still defeated the Nazis. Socialism still conquered outer space. Socialism still electrified and made the Soviet Union a global industrial power. Socialism still raised China into being what it is now, the second largest economy in the world. Socialism still created the healthcare system of Cuba that is admired by the world all over. When Libya was a socialist society, it still had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. So whether or not this individual atrocity was actually committed by the Soviet government or not doesn't change the narrative. At risk of a double entendre. But when you're talking about the Katyn massacre in Katyn Forest, don't miss the forest for the trees, right? Don't, again, there are many government officials in the history of socialism and in the history of capitalism who've done bad things, okay? That doesn't change the overall record. The entire historical record of the 20th century is on our side. Socialism industrialized countries. It raised people out of poverty. It defeated Hitler. It invented space travel. It made China a superpower. It made Russia a superpower. It invented LED lights, for example. It electrified so many regions, wiped out illiteracy in so many countries. The largest power plant in the Middle East, the dam in the Aswan Dam in Egypt, was built by the Soviet Union. In Syria, so many hydroelectrical power plants were built by the Soviet Union. The world's largest highway, for info on the Katyn massacre, check out the UK Stalin Society. Sure, I'll check out what they have had to say. The largest highway that's elevated, the highest highway in the world, is the China-Pakistan Friendship Highway that was built by socialism. Socialism has done so much that one detail of one incident in the context of World War II, if the Soviet government, in the context of World War II, committed this horrendous atrocity, I oppose that and I condemn it, number one. And number two, that doesn't change the entire historical narrative. And we shouldn't get caught on little details like this. We shouldn't get caught on little details like this, because if we get caught on these things, right, if we get caught on did this atrocity happen, that's a way of completely diverting away from the big picture, right? And that's the lie, right? And that I don't know who was guilty and who was innocent at the Moscow trials, right? I mean, there were many people who went to the Moscow trials and believed that Zinoviev and Kamenev and others were guilty of their crimes. Now there's many people who believe they were framed, that Bukharin and Zinoviev and Kamenev and others who were convicted at the Moscow trials, that they were innocent. They were innocent, and this was a power grab by Stalin. Well, I don't know. I wasn't there, but does that change the reality of what the Soviet Union achieved? Does that change that they made Russia an industrial power, defeated the Nazis? I mean, raised the life expectancy, almost doubled the life expectancy? I mean, give me a break. So there you go. There you go. Now, Trump says he felt used by the Soleimani strike. Oh, that's nice, Trump. That's great. You murdered the top Iranian general, the national hero of the Islamic Republic, a guy who saved the lives of thousands of Christians in Syria, thousands of Christians in Iraq, who was the biggest enemy of ISIS on the battlefield. You basically did a huge favor for Al-Qaeda. and for the terrorists. You almost brought us to the brink of World War III by murdering one of the most beloved and important people in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And now you say, oh, Israel made me do it. Well, maybe Israel did pressure you to do it. I believe that. I said that at the time. At the time, I did say that Israel had pressured you to do that, right? I suspected that Israel had pressured you to do it. Regardless, you still did it, Donald Trump. You still did it, and you had enough of a cult of personality, Donald Trump. Your followers would have been okay with you not doing that. Your followers would have supported you if you hadn't done it. So shame on you, Donald Trump. Shame on you for bringing the world close to World War III. Shame on you for murdering an anti-imperialist hero who fought and protected Christians. Shame on you for attacking an independent country like the Islamic Republic of Iran that has broken out of the Western capitalist system. Shame on you for putting us in danger of war and helping all the terrorists in the world who feared Qasem Soleimani and his heroic activities. Shame on you, Donald Trump. I mean, yeah, did Israel pressure you to do it? At the time, you can go back and watch the video I made. You can watch the video I made. I made a video about the killing of Qasem Soleimani that was shown all over Iranian TV, all over Lebanese TV. And at the time, what did I say? I said that Donald Trump is facing impeachment, and he did this as a favor to the neocons and the Israel lobby, that he wanted to make sure that when the impeachment vote was taken, that the neocons and the Israel lobby had his back. That's what I said. So Donald Trump is now confirming what I said. How many times do I have to be right, folks? I have been right so many times. So many times I've been right. Back a long time ago, right? 2008, 2009, Obama was coming into office, and all these Republicans were turning into libertarians. And I said to the communists, and I said to all of them, I said, you know, there's a little bit of a problem here, and I think that the opposition, right-wing opposition to the status quo is going to be a problem. We need to refute libertarianism. We need to refute, these right-wing ideas. Alex Jones. They didn't listen to me. I was right. I told you all that BreadTube was probably being backed by American intelligence, by one intelligence agency or another, the deep state. And now we have the documents. We have the documents from Gray Zone. Abigail Thorne was getting paid by the deep state, getting paid to make propaganda, working with a firm that was involved in trying to overthrow the Syrian government. I was right. There are many examples. I could go down the line. Kamala Harris. I told you all that Kamala Harris is an unstable, dangerous person, a sadistic narcissist. And what do we know now? Her staff has come forward and said that she routinely subjects them to, quote, soul-crushing criticism, that she has a fragile ego, that she's not very strong, that she refuses to be prepped for things. I was right. Right? I'm just telling you, folks, I'm not right because I can do magic. I'm not claiming to have magical powers, or, I'm not sitting here going, tell me about Kamala Harris. It's not how it works. I understand dialectical and historical materialism. I understand the way the world works. I understand personality theory and psychoanalysis. I understand economics, right? And because I understand economics, I was right. Right? And I know why Donald Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, because I've been to Iran, folks. I have been in the same room as the supreme leader of Iran. And, I have been one of the few Americans to actually be in the presence of the supreme leader. I've met many prominent Iranians before. I'm telling you, folks, when I told you back when Trump killed Qasem Soleimani that he was doing it to please his allies in Israel, I was right. But that doesn't mean I forgive Donald Trump for doing that. What he did was a cowardly, evil thing that brought us to the brink of World War III. And that is a horrendous thing, a horrendous activity, what Donald Trump did. It was cold-blooded murder. Qasem Soleimani was in Iraq negotiating. He was in Iraq negotiating, trying to bring peace to Iraq. And it was a cowardly act, and shame on Donald Trump for what he did. And there you go. Wasn't Eldridge Cleaver an ultra-leftist and a sellout? Ultra-leftist, yes. He led a split from the Black Panther Party that engaged in ultra-left adventurous terrorism. Huey Newton was absolutely right to condemn Eldridge Cleaver for what he did. The correct line was to build a mass community organization, survival pending revolution. Furthermore, in the 1980s, Eldridge Cleaver came back to the United States claiming to be a Republican. And I think was he a Mormon for a while, and then he started his own religion that was a mixture of Islam and Christianity. And yeah, Eldridge Cleaver in the 1980s, he was weird and he was all over the place. He was denouncing communism. So yes, I don't know if sellout is the right word I would use, but in order to come back to the United States, he needed to kind of renounce his old beliefs. So yeah, that's true as well. The John Brown Volunteers in Texas, they're doing great. They just had a class tonight with San Angelo Solidarity about dialectical and historical materialism, tremendous stuff. And they're doing great work. I was just on the phone with Keaton today. I'll be down there in March for an event. We're still trying to figure out the details about that. But yeah, they're doing a great job. There's local folks who've been working with them. I don't know what names I can say on here and not, so I'm not going to say names. But they're meeting a lot of local activists, and they're doing great work. They're doing tremendous work. I'm really proud of everything that they're doing. We've been talking a lot about, how we can adjust what they're doing at this point to make it more effective, how they're going to work in coordination with San Angelo Solidarity, how they're going to do Project 432 stuff. But they're doing great. I couldn't be prouder of them. They're good folks. They know what they're doing. They have study sessions. They're great folks, and they're doing great. And if you want to support their efforts, if you want to support the John Brown Volunteers, you can always shoot me a donation on PayPal. It's just, calebmaupin@gmail.com. You can shoot me a PayPal donation, and that'll help me cover their costs because it is a little bit pricey, doing what they're doing, but it's worth doing. It's good. You got to have, all right, Adorno. You got to have people, you got to have cadre, right? You got to have cadre who are able to do the work of building a mass working class movement. Alrighty. The Indonesian genocide of 1965. I haven't seen that particular documentary that you mentioned, but I'm familiar with what happened, right? The government of Indonesia was aligned with China and the Soviet Union, and the USA overthrew the government, and then in the process killed 500,000 people. Started out as just rounding up members of the Indonesian Communist Party, but pretty soon it turned into a genocide of ethnically Chinese people. You hear it's like the rivers were clogged with dead bodies. It was a horrendous massacre. And Barack Obama's stepfather, his stepfather was involved in it. Lolo Soetoro was involved in it. And U.S. media has covered that up and never talks about that. But yes, the 1965 genocide in Indonesia, the military coup, horrendous stuff. You can read about it. It's pretty horrendous what happened. The overthrow of an anti-imperialist government, the genocide backed by the United States. Yes, absolutely. Zizek's critique of China. Well, Zizek critiques China for police state stuff. He critiques China for the fact that the Chinese government has worked very, very hard to try and maximize wealth creation. He sees China as kind of a combination, on the one hand, of police state power and of corporate interests. But what he's missing is that there is a fundamental difference between the corporations in China and the corporations in the United States, which is that the Chinese Communist Party forces those corporations to work in the interests of society overall. But yes, and especially the Chinese government has worked very hard to generate wealth for corporations, and the Chinese government works very hard to control those corporations. So he's observing real trends, but he's not interpreting them correctly. So that's where we go there. Was the life of the peasant better than the industrial worker? No, I wouldn't say so. In terms of life expectancy, it wasn't better. In terms of calorie intake, it wasn't better. That said, in the early years of the Industrial Revolution, you might be able to make that argument. There's, I think, Durkheim, who was one of the early sociologists. He wrote a book called Suicide. And it was mainly a study of peasants who moved to urban areas. And in urban areas, in these urban centers, they worked in factories that were very anonymous. They didn't have a community to be friends with. They were miserable, and they committed suicide. That was one of the first works of sociology. And that, yes, in the early years of the Industrial Revolution, as you had the peasantry moving to the cities, becoming industrial workers, they were pretty miserable. And, that's not to, there were aspects of being a peasant where there was more economic security, for example. Peasants, you didn't get unemployed. You were always there. You were always a peasant. Peasants, there was not the same level of alienation. They were with their family. They were with their community. So there were aspects of peasant life that were healthier. But overall, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of access to medical care, in terms of literacy, no, peasants were not better off. But there's, I mean, this is kind of what Marxists talk about when they talk about primitive accumulation, right? If you read the very end of this book, right, Capital, right, Capital Volume 1, there's a section called Primitive Accumulation. I think it's like chapter 8. Let me check, right, right, chapter 8, part 8, the so-called primitive accumulation. And that's all about how in order to create capitalism, right, you had to have like a mass genocide. And this is the sheer hypocrisy of people who say socialism is theft, blah, 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 that the clearing of the commons, the privatization of land, the establishment of a market economy in Britain, in France, in Germany, and other capitalist countries involved, killing millions of people, throwing them off the land. There was, it was, the primitive accumulation in which the capitalist class seized power from feudalism, in which the feudal commons, they were called, were turned into private property, was very brutal. And there were a lot of people killed in the process. It was a bloody process in which many, 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 many thousands of people died. In Britain, they had executions for being homeless, for example. And that never gets talked about. Capitalism began with mass theft. And then there was mass theft of the United States from the Native Americans. And then there was mass theft, in terms of the transcontinental slave trade. And colonialism, and capitalism began with an orgy of mass theft and killing. And so the process of creating capitalism, the process of breaking apart the feudal commons was very bloody, and it harmed a lot of people. A lot of people would argue that the book Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is kind of hinting at that, that people are kind of left behind. As human progress is marching forward, you have new technology, people are losing their soul, right? That's the whole point. It's like Dr. Frankenstein creates the monster. He creates this monster, but he never gives it love and care and affection, and so it's a horrible thing, and it's supposed to be an analogy for the Industrial Revolution. All righty. Okay, the French elections. What would be the ideal outcome? Well, if there was a candidate, who was fighting for working people in France and wanted to bring them together and had a program of dismantling French imperialism, fighting for the working class, that would be a good thing. Generally, unfortunately, that's not, the way French politics is going. Generally, the main opposition that's emerging in France right now is the New Right, right? It's the, It's Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, and the New Right. And the New Right is very problematic in many ways. But they are emerging as kind of the opposition at this point. And that's a problem, right? Because the left has dropped the ball. The New Right becomes the force of opposition. Same here in the United States with Trump. And if the left doesn't get their stuff together, the right is going to be the only source of opposition, and the right has no real way out of this crisis, right? So there you go. The difference between mercantilism and capitalism. Well, okay, so this is a lot of Marxist scholars, right? Old left put more emphasis on direct action and programs, while contemporary left puts more emphasis on vague slogans. Left. On action. New left. All right. Mercantilism is, as capitalism is emerging, right? Modern capitalism is you have factory owners producing products, selling them, exploiting the wages of workers. But mercantilism is where you have the Silk Road from Asia, and you have merchants who are going around trading. You have the beginning of money lending. That was like a precursor to modern industrial capitalism. Okay. All right. Precursor to modern industrial capitalism. All right. There we go. Right-wingers in Rhodesia. Why do they like Rhodesia? Well, the man who shot Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., What was his name? What is it? James Earl Ray was a member of the Friends of Rhodesia Club, and a lot of white supremacists they liked the apartheid government of Rhodesia, and that's a fixation of the white supremacist crowd for a long time. They liked the apartheid government of South Africa also, and they didn't like that communists were trying to overturn it. They would fit it into this narrative of the white man is civilized, he's civilizing the jungle, blah 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 blah. It's just a racist white supremacist trope. Right, I believe Dylan Roof, the guy who shot up the church in South Carolina, he had the flag of Rhodesia on when he shot up the church. Very horrendous stuff. And Rhodesia, apartheid Rhodesia was very horrendous, right? Very, very horrendous. And the demonization of Mugabe now, right? I mean, it's really unbelievable. The imperialists want to tell you they're all woke and all of that, but they still demonize the government of Zimbabwe. About Putin's efforts to bring Biden into dialogue. All right. The demonization of the government of Zimbabwe, which is, redistributing, the land, and, allowing black people to own land, has nationalized the diamond mines, etc., is fighting the white farmers. The Zimbabwe African National Union government, ZANU, is a revolutionary anti-imperialist government. Robert Mugabe has retired. Then that's okay. He had some disagreements with his party and he was getting older. It was time for him to retire. But ZANU is still a revolutionary party that is fighting for the colonized people. And, the right-wingers hate it. And this is where the woke left and the white supremacists agree, because they both hate the government of Zimbabwe. The woke left, they watched CNN. Mugabe is evil. So they watched CNN, so Mugabe must be evil. There you go. That's how they are. But they're agreeing with white supremacists because the opposition to Mugabe and the opposition to ZANU-PF is largely and a racist white supremacist opposition. Ian Smith is not a progressive. So there you go. Adorno lectures on dialectics. I haven't listened to them. I don't like Theodore Adorno. Not a big fan. Theodore Adorno's work was subsidized by the CIA through Partisan Review magazine, through Encounter and Dear Monat. His book, The Authoritarian Personality, is utter trash. It's utter trash. And these are the people that changed Marxism and reinvented Marxism to be some anti-authoritarian woke crap. I really don't like Adorno at all. He's not a Marxist. He's a cultural critic, So there you go. All right. I think Ewoks Unhinged just did a great video about dissecting this concept of the authoritarian personality and how it's not in line with Marxism. The authoritarian personality is basically, if you believe in something, if you're willing to fight for a cause and make sacrifices, you're a sucker. You should believe in shades of gray. You should question everything. You should be a pessimistic, cynical, drug-using hippie is what they think, right? I've read the authoritarian personality. It's trash. It's utter trash. And it's an attack on people like me who believe in this stuff, right? We're all suckers of totalitarian systems, right? It's trash. It's utter trash. It wants you to be a postmodern, one of these people that doesn't believe in anything. All right. Is it true that the old left put more emphasis on action and the new left on vague slogans? Yes. The old left put more emphasis on action. That's true. And especially labor action, labor unions. The old left was all about labor unions, economic struggles, and that the demands they raised were things people could understand. The new left, was about vague concepts, awareness about racism, awareness about, like when you talk about things like prison abolition. Well, I would like to get to a society where there's no prisons. I would like that. But the problem is that in order to do that, we need to have socialism. And if you go around to working people and say, I want to abolish prisons, they think you're a lunatic. Right? It's not a policy that makes sense to people. Same with abolish the police. Again, I'd like a society where we had no police. But again, in order to get that, we would have to have socialism. And that, the woke left is all about kind of unleashing people's rage and impulses, vague feelings about authority and the state, academics. They're all about academia. It's intersectionality and all this. And again, it's not about things that working people can actually understand. Because if you start putting forward demands, real material demands that working people can understand, then your funding's going to get cut. It's all a hustle. It's about getting grant money. It's about getting grant money to write your paper, to go back to grad school, to run your little NGO and hire all your friends to, it's a scam. In a lot of ways, it's just a bureaucratic scam. There's certain people that I used to work with that were involved in the NGO-socialist hustle, right? Where they get their grant money to, run a nonprofit that is fighting white supremacy or something like that. And it's a scam largely. And it's about performance. It's about performance. It's about helping the Democrats, doing what the Democrats need. And it's not fighting imperialism. Is Kim Jong-un anti-imperialist? Is the Pope Catholic? North Korea is a country. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea is struggling against imperialism. And yes, Kim Jong-un, as the leader of a country struggling against imperialism, is an anti-imperialist. North Korea has been fighting for its life against U.S. imperialism. The USA still does not recognize them. There's still not a formal end to the Korean War. So yeah, I would say Kim Jong-un is an anti-imperialist. Are you optimistic about Putin's efforts to bring Biden into dialogue? Yes, I am. Because I don't think Biden wants World War III. There's a push. It's like the Cold War. There's a game of chicken going on where it's push pull. But I think ultimately Biden, as out of it as Biden is, he doesn't want a new war. I think Putin is far sharper than Biden is. Biden, I don't think he knows. He doesn't even know what "Let's Go Brandon" means. But Putin is very on the ball. Putin knows what's happening. And I think that Putin is able to handle Biden, and I'm hoping that leads to a de-escalation, because that's what the whole world needs. We don't need a new war with Russia, not a new war with China, a new war with Venezuela. We need a workers' uprising against Wall Street. We need a workers' uprising against the Pentagon. All right? Our enemy is on Wall Street. Our enemy is in London. Our enemy is on the stock exchange. Our enemy is in the Pentagon. Our enemy is not in Russia. So, our real enemy is at home, as has often been said. So we need class struggle, not wars to enforce the global imperialist system. And on that note, folks, I'm going to end. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.